This is Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. From the corporate office to the cab of a truck, they're here to inspire and empower women in all professions. So gear down, sit back, and enjoy.
Welcome. We're an award-winning show dedicated to empowering women in every profession through inspiring stories and expert insights. No topics off limits on our show. We power women on the road to success with expert and celebrity interviews and information you need. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Kathy.
Today's guest brings us a story that's as gripping as it is unforgettable. One that sat in silence for over 50 years before finally being told. Mimi Nichter is an award-winning cultural and medical anthropologist, public speaker, and former professor at the University of Arizona. She's the author of multiple acclaimed works and a recipient of the prestigious Margaret Mead Award and the George Foster Practicing Medical Anthropology Award. But today, we're talking about something deeply personal. At just 20 years of age, Mimi boarded a flight home after a summer in Israel, wearing a green mini dress and thinking about returning to college life. It was going to be just another normal travel day back home. What happened next would change her life and history forever. Her plane was hijacked by armed militants from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and diverted into the desert of Jordan, part of what would become one of the most significant acts of international terrorism of its time. Held hostage for days, caught in the middle of a war zone, and forced to confront fear, identity, and survival, Mimi's story is not just about what happened back then. It's about trauma, resilience, and what it means to finally tell the truth. Her new book, Hostage, a Memoir of Terrorism, Trauma, and Resilience, is the personal account of what captured the world's attention and a powerful testament to courage, humanity, and healing. We all have a lot to learn from Mimi. Mimi, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
You're welcome. I'm honored to be here. The honor is all ours to have you. Wow. Thank you.
Yes. Mimi, you are a remarkable woman. You've accomplished so much despite what you went through, and your story is riveting. You were among the passengers who were held on board a plane by terrorists for 6 days in 120-degree heat without flushing toilets or running water, crying children, armed guards everywhere, and then in the middle of an area where violent war erupted around you. Most people were sent home, but you were held hostage after being accused of being an Israeli soldier by your captors. Telling this story requires a special kind of courage. Oh, my goodness. Would you mind sharing what happened?
Sure. So I was, as you said, Shelley, we were flying home. I was coming home from a summer in Israel where I had worked a kibbutz, a communal farm. And I was really looking forward to getting back to college. But what happened was, as the flight was going over Brussels, we had left from Tel Aviv earlier that morning, the pilot said, oh, it's about 8 hours till New York, where I was headed and where I lived. And then 2 people ran down the aisle, a man and a woman, and someone yelled, he's got a gun, she's got a grenade. And believe it or not, at that time, I really didn't know what to think. I knew that there had been some hijackings before, but remember, this is 1970, and at that time, there really hadn't been much of this kind of thing. And when there was, it was hijackings of a plane, maybe from Miami to Cuba, where they wanted the plane. And really, hijackings were more of an inconvenience than anything else. I just didn't even consider that they would want us for some reason. And so it wasn't, the plane turned around in the air. They went into the cockpit and they made the pilot turn around, a sharp turn in the air. And we flew for another 7 hours or so. And finally, we didn't hear anything from them except when they got on the plane and they said, we're the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And then literally hours later, they got on again and they said, you'll be landing soon in a friendly country. We'll be landing in Jordan. And they took us to this remote desert where there was no runway, no terminal, nothing. And it wasn't until the pilot brought the plane down, thankfully, safely, that when I looked out the window, there were all these men with guns And that was really scary. And someone else got on the plane. Now, mind you, because this wasn't an airport, there weren't even, like stairs to bring out. But so they took a Jeep and they put a ladder on the back of the Jeep so the hijackers could get off the plane. And two new people, Palestinians, could get on the plane to tell us that they were going to collect our passports and give us, some landing cards where they wanted information about each of us. And the people who were sitting across from me they took out 4 passports. They were an Orthodox Jewish couple, and they took out 2 American passports each and 2 Israeli passports. And the man started to tear up the Israeli passports and the identification pages. She took out a nail clipper and started clipping the pages into tiny little pieces. This is the picture, the picture page. And then they swallowed those pages with a little bit of water. They put the other pieces in between the seats because all this, Shelley, was sort of building. And I was, kind of trying to make out why were these people so afraid? Of course, they realized immediately that if they were identified as, dual citizens, something terrible could happen to them. So, as you said, we then sat on that plane for 6 days during extreme heat. And you can imagine all these people and children. And actually, on the second day, they did send home all the people who were non-Americans and non-Jewish. And so only American Jews were left on the plane, but there were plenty of us because we were, coming from Israel. And it was Labor Day weekend, so there were big families on the plane, lots of kids, lots of crying children and mothers. I mean, just even practical things. Like there was people get on a plane, they have diapers for, 12 hours. Change of clothes for their kids for 12 hours. Well, now you're on the plane for 6 days. There's no more diapers. So literally the crew had to take all the sort of the napkins from first class and distribute them to the parents. There was not enough food for everyone. There were very religious people on the plane who didn't eat non-kosher food. So it was quite an ordeal. And the scariest part actually was because of this, they went through our luggage, and in my bag, as you said, they found a bag with an army shirt, and they accused me of being a soldier. Well, I was an anti-war activist in the U.S. It was the time of Vietnam. And I had been protesting against this war. And so being accused of being, a soldier was just so far from my real identity. But yet, I was interrogated at gunpoint twice. And they really wanted me to sort of confess that I was this soldier, which of course I couldn't do. But that's what led to my being held after many people were released.
And you were held for quite a while with 31 other people?
Yes, I was held for about 21 days. And eventually, after 6 days, there was just, they had been taking men off the plane every night, and we didn't know where they were taking them. And their wives would be left on the plane or their families, their children, and they would be crying. So it was it sounds horrible, but even at night, we couldn't sleep. First, because we were sitting up in these chairs, and it was cold at night, very, very cold in the desert at night, very, very hot in the day. When I say hot, I mean over 100 degrees. And we were just literally hostage there with great fear because they had wired the planes, because they were, I should tell you that why they were doing all this, the Palestinians, was because they wanted their prisoners who were held in Israeli prisons, as well as some other European countries, to be released. And that's what this was about. And ultimately, that did not happen.
It had to be absolutely. I don't think there are any words to describe how you felt and everyone else. You're in a state of basically hypervigilance the entire time. You have no idea what's happening to your loved ones, what's going to happen to you. Did you think you were going to get out alive? I mean, at the age of 20, how do you process something like that?
Well, I remember when I was interrogated, with a gun at my head, all I could think, because physically shaking, I was so upset, but I didn't want to cry, not in front of these interrogators. And I knew I just had to be strong. But I remember thinking, they didn't kill anybody yet. They're interrogating other people as well. So I'm not going to be the first. So that's sort of how I got through that moment. But it was really moment to moment. And one thing we did was we actually made what we called a summer camp for the kids. We would take them, once there were more seats, empty seats in the back of the plane, we'd take the kids to the back and have them sit down with, whatever they had. If they had a deck of playing cards or Mad Libs, or just even one woman who was with us, three of us made a camp. We called it a summer camp, and we sang songs like John Denver's. Instead of leaving on a jet plane, we made it living on a jet plane. And, we just tried to be creative with them. And it was just moments of levity.
Sure.
And moments of, fun.
Yep.
And, it was all that's one way I think we coped. I also coped by meeting, because I was traveling alone. That's a very important part of this all. I made, friends. I bonded with other people, like, for example, other women my age. Although that was difficult too, because some of the people, on the plane were quite religious, and I wasn't. And but it didn't really matter who we were at home. Here we were in this situation, and I, met another guy who was also a college student, and a few women who were also traveling alone, who were also college students, and they really became my kind of friends and people I could talk to. My seatmate was also a little more knowledgeable. He was 40 years old. I thought he was really old. When I wrote the book, I realized what his age was, really. I was really shocked because I thought he was so old. I guess at 20, anyone who's a little older seems that way.
Oh, sure.
There's a couple of different parts to this story, which is that, one part was we were on the plane for 6 days. They blew up the planes, which I saw. And that was just really a very frightening moment, because literally we were taken off the plane and a few minutes later they were blown up. And I say planes because over the week that we were held there, they took other planes as well.
Really?
Yes, they did. This was a very large incident. They actually took 3 airplanes, and they had 2 others they attempted to bring. But, they threatened as the days went by that if our government, Nixon was the president at the time, if our government didn't, do what they wanted, they would kill us. And that was their line, that they're going to kill us, and they're going to blow up the planes with us on them. So when they took us off the plane, just moments before they blew them up, that was it was relieving in a sense, because we didn't die in that moment.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
If you're enjoying this informative episode of Women Road Warriors, I wanted to mention Kathy and I explore all kinds of topics that will power you on the road to success. We feature a lot of expert interviews. Plus, we feature celebrities and women who've been trailblazers. Please check out our podcast at womenroadwarriors.com and click on our episodes page. We're also available wherever you listen to podcasts, on all the major podcast channels like Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, you name it. Check us out and bookmark our podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other sites. And tell others about us. We want to help as many women as possible. How do you rebuild your life after surviving an act of terrorism? Joining us is Mimi Nichter, an award-winning anthropologist and former professor at the University of Arizona. She's the author of Hostage, a memoir of terrorism, trauma, and resilience. She recounts her extraordinary journey after surviving a plane hijacking to finding healing after decades of silence. Mimi, before we went to break, you talked about being held for nearly a month by the terrorist group after you'd left Israel and threatened with death if their demands were not met by the Nixon administration. You said at one point you were taken off the plane and watched as it was blown up, and being grateful you were still alive at that moment. You were only 20 and processing fear you'd never felt before. What was it that you felt when they blew up that plane?
Just to watch the planes being blown up was just so intense. And just the black smoke rising up into the sky. And, that smoke from 3 jets was so dense. And literally the pieces of the plane were flying through the air. And the whole earth was shaking so much. I thought the little bus we were sitting on was going to flip over. So I didn't want to watch this, but I couldn't not watch it.
But would it also be like your hope just blew up because now where are you going to go? You can't fly out? Like, well, now what?
Yes, now what for us? Because we were just a few women at that moment because they only, and then we had no idea where we were being taken. And we were driven far in these little buses and as I said, there was no road. We had to drive miles before we even, found a road. And then once we found a road, we passed a Palestinian refugee camp and there were people lining the streets cheering because they had seen the black smoke from so many miles away. I think you can see that smoke from maybe 10, 15 miles away and from the jets being blown up. They knew that had happened and they were so excited to see, excited, I don't know if that's the right word. They were just maybe thrilled that we were the captives. And they, the Palestinians had done this feat, this huge, unimaginable feat done by this refugee community. And there we were, they were cheering on the side of the road. And then finally we got taken to a place and they told us we were now held because we were going to be held longer. So at that point, yes, it was terribly frightening because I didn't know how long that would be, how anyone would find us now. If anyone was looking, which was another question we had, if anyone was looking, how could they ever find us now? We're just a small group now and we're far from the plains and I have no idea where we are. We're somewhere out in Amman, but that's a city. And so that was a big worry. And of course, the other worry was that now we were just 4 young women and 1 slightly older woman, 5 women and a small group of men, and what could happen to us women. And remember, I was wearing a green mini dress.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
It's kind of like note to self, don't travel in a mini dress. Not that I would anymore, but just this fear of what could happen with all these men around. And some of them, some of these captors, these terrorists were quite young. And it was terrible, because now we could sit on the floor, it was, and that's all there was in this tiny apartment they took us to. And, it was very difficult to sit on the floor in a mini dress and try to be appropriate in a Middle Eastern country.
Sure.
And this wasn't, the bombing of the planes was one thing, but then there was a civil war that broke out in the city of Amman. And so that was far worse than anything we had experienced to then. And then we were there for another 2 weeks and the city was being bombed and being blown up. And that was far more frightening than anything else because that's when we really came close to death.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. There's no words right now. Holy smokes.
Yeah. You were living from minute to minute, not knowing what the heck was happening. You didn't know if you were going to be alive in the next minute. You didn't know what was happening to the other people. I mean, you were interrogated, you were asked about your religion, and of course, the wrong answer could mean death. This was something else in your book. You decided at that moment to admit you were Jewish. Now, that took tremendous courage. It was a moment of truth, identity, and courage under pressure. A lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that. What motivated you to do that?
Well, I grew up in a religious family and I had a religious Jewish education. And as I got older, really as I moved into high school, but certainly as I moved into college, I had become really secular and, secular Jewish. And I went, I wanted to travel the world. And I knew that my parents, who were religious, would always support my wanting to go to Israel, which is why I had gone there. And I thought with those days, we thought of Israel as the socialist country, and a kibbutz, a communal farm, was really a place where there was gender equality, where women and men worked together, and women did all kinds of roles. Like they did all kinds of work, which was unusual at that time. And you didn't get paid, but also you got everything you needed. They gave you clothes to wear, they gave you food to eat, and I liked that exchange and that lack of hierarchy in the community, and that's why I went there. Of course, that's not how we think about the country now, but in that moment, I had developed this while I was in Israel for just a couple of months this summer. I had really developed a secular Jewish identity, and I realized that I didn't have to be religious to think of myself as Jewish, which is, sort of how I had grown up. You had to be religious, you had to be observant. But there it didn't matter. I was just accepted because I was born Jewish. That was good. And so that's why I think because I had developed this new strong identity while I was there, being a secular Jew, I couldn't just lie, even though I knew nobody on the plane, and I could have lied, but I didn't. I just did. It just didn't feel right to me in the moment.
You were true to yourself under
Yes.
tremendous threat and pressure. That's remarkable. Your courage. You were very courageous and you had no idea. I think when we're 20 years old, we don't have a total grasp of the world yet. So, and then you came out a changed person, I'm sure. I mean,
Yeah, I was just going to say that whole experiences must shaped your whole future.
Well, it did in many ways, because when I came home, at that time in 1970, there wasn't even a concept yet of PTSD. And I was brought up at a time when we didn't talk about trauma. And I like to say I was socialized into silence. Anything that seemed out of the ordinary or something we didn't talk about. And when I came home, my parents thought that I should go back to college, and that was going to be healing for me. Go back to college, just move on, forget about this. Forget this happened to you. And actually that was, sort of a cultural approach to trauma at that time. The vets who were coming home from Vietnam, they didn't have therapy or anything like that. They just went home. And they had a hard time adjusting, because you can't just do that. You can't leave one life of war and almost death and then come home to normalcy. The brain doesn't work that way. And when I returned to college, it was particularly stressful for me because my college friends really, who were largely anti-war activists like myself, thought of what had happened to me as they romanticized it. They thought it was cool. They thought it was far out. They thought, wow, you were with real revolutionaries. That must have, you saw how they worked and you saw so much there, and that's really far out. And I was like, and then tell us the story, they would say. Tell us the story of what happened. And I realized that so many times my friends, understood very little. they had an image, a very wrong image of what revolution was, what war was, not really comprehending the depth, the fear, the actual terror of it all. And, when people said things to me like, "Oh, tell me the story," I just felt, this isn't a story. This was my life. This was my, kind of existence at its, last thread. And I don't want to tell it to you like it's a story. And so I really began to be quiet about it. And I never, that was just the beginning, because once I didn't talk about it then, I really stopped talking about it. I just didn't think anyone could understand, because I was 20 and 20-year-olds don't have this experience. And our culture didn't, so partly it was the culture, and, partly it was me. And I had grown up in a family where my brother was living with schizophrenia, and we were never supposed to talk about him. So we grew up with this idea that if something is not, you don't have to talk about things if you don't want to. And certainly we didn't talk about things that seemed out of the norm. And he was out of the norm. We didn't talk about him. And so I just did what I did with him. I didn't talk about him. I didn't talk about my trauma.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
Today we're talking with Mimi Nichter. She's the author of Hostage, a memoir of terrorism, trauma, and resilience. At just 20 years of age, Mimi survived the unimaginable when the plane she was on was hijacked, and she was taken hostage in the Jordanian desert and thrust into the middle of a civil war with her plane being blown up. But as powerful as that story is, what makes it even more important is what happened afterward. Some stories don't end when the headlines fade. They continue to shape a person's life for decades. While the hijacking itself was terrifying, the emotional aftermath and the journey toward healing are just as compelling. After keeping the experience buried for over 50 years, Mimi finally found the courage to share not only what happened during those harrowing days, but how trauma can quietly follow us long after the crisis is over. She shares the extraordinary story of survival and the journey away from trauma and into healing, resilience, and hope. Mimi, in our previous segment, you said you basically stopped talking about what happened to you very early because that's just what was done back then. Things out of the norm you just didn't talk about. And not being able to deal with it, not being able to talk to somebody who could even relate to you, that is so isolating. And having to have silence because you didn't want to have to share it, because you don't want to explain these things to people who have absolutely no clue at all. What does trauma do to silence someone for that long? I mean, you really had to keep that pent up. That had to have been really difficult.
It was particularly difficult for me when there was another incident in the world. Like 2 years after our hijacking, the same group, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who had sort of reorganized themselves and now called themselves Black September, after what had happened to us in September, they had become more militant, and they went to the Munich Olympics and they killed Israeli athletes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so we were very fortunate to come home alone. And so when other incidents occurred across, the many years, they took hostages, there were hostages taken in Iran. The hostage situation became more common. Ours was the first really big one, but then there was, so many other things that happened just places where innocent people were killed. And so that triggered what I felt. This story, this buried trauma resurfaced with the triggering by other events. And even now, when I look at the pictures of how we're blowing up Iran, pictures of Tehran falling, these big apartment buildings falling, it brings me back to Amman and the devastation of Amman in 1970. So there's a lot of potential triggers, which I've learned now, to navigate, but it's still there.
Sure. And back in 1970, like you said, people didn't talk about things. They didn't have the therapy. They didn't have, like you said, PTSD was not discussed. So you didn't have the support system. So you were really kind of wandering around in isolation, which is so hard. I mean, the fact that you were able to accomplish what you have in spite of all of this and not having the support system, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think I was lucky. And I think I was lucky because, I think I was lucky because of the age I was at. I don't know if lucky is the right word, but, there's post-traumatic growth also that I think particularly if you're an emerging adult as I was, meaning, you're in late adolescence. I was 20 years old, a young adult. That was a period of time where I could learn, listen. I wasn't, my opinions were still being formed and my thoughts were still being formed. And I think, I traveled soon after this event. And so that laid the groundwork, I think, for me, a new identity to emerge. I became a traveler and I learned to observe and listen and, eventually becoming an anthropologist. So I think I found my way forward, but that's not to say that, you never leave trauma behind.
No, you don't.
That's the truth.
Yeah, it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
Did this shape your career? Because you really had a study in human behavior during this whole ordeal, from the passengers and how they reacted to the terrorists. And there were so many dynamics. Did that help you in your career as an anthropologist?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think one thing that happened to me when I was a hostage was the two Palestinian women, sisters, came and talked to us, the women. So we were women to women in a small room, and some of the fear was not there because they didn't have guns at the moment. And so they were just telling us about their history, about the history of how and why they had become terrorists. I mean, these were women who were in their 20s also. And, they had become terrorists at a very young age because they felt very limited by their, lack of opportunity. They was living in refugee camps, even though they'd been in Jordan for many years. They didn't have citizenship there. That was the first time I heard about a story from the other side, because I had grown up in New York, Jewish community. And here I was, talking to Palestinians who were telling me a different story. And I realized, I think this is the impact it had on me, that I had been raised in sort of black and white, right and wrong, with very little gray. And here I was listening to their history and thinking, well, that's not the history I heard. And just realizing that history is told by different people in a very different way. And that's the first time I realized that. And I think I took that, into my life, that idea, that I took it forward, that we really need to listen and we need to observe and live with people to begin. Not that I live with Palestinians, I did not, but to observe something about them. But the idea of listening is something that I carried as a cultural anthropologist, because that's really the essence, is living with people. And I think what it helped me to do was, as I wrote the book, because I had lived with rural people in South Asia, particularly in India, for years as an anthropologist, I realized how important their land was to them, how rooted they were, literally rooted just like their trees, their land was everything to them. And it's in fact how they defined themselves was like where their roots were. And when I wrote the book, when I look back on what I remembered, these Palestinian women talking about their loss of their trees, it gave a new meaning to it. That they didn't have a homeland. They were completely rootless. So, I think it worked both ways. Like, I think traveling and becoming an anthropologist has given me a whole new identity. One that I don't know, I might not have had if it wasn't for this experience. I'm not sure. I can't know, but I think writing the book, I brought my long-term experience of living with so many people, for many years out of this country and mostly, agriculturalists.
You learn new perspectives. And like you said, active listening.
Yes.
Listening is something people are not good at. I think they're even worse at it today, honestly.
Absolutely.
Attention spans are so much shorter, so people can't seem to focus it long enough to listen, actually listen, right? They're so busy planning ahead and thinking 10,000 things that they can't stop and actually look at you and pay attention to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And of course, with our phones, we're used to instant gratification and really affecting our ability to think and to process. It's harder for people to read now in a book. And we all know that. I mean, we have our new addictions.
It's important for me with family time to, when we're together, put your phone away. This is family time. We're doing whatever it is that we're doing. No, you put your phone away.
That's right.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
What does it take to survive the unimaginable and then find the courage to talk about it decades later? Our guest is Mimi Nichter, an award-winning anthropologist, former professor at the University of Arizona, and the recipient of two of her field's highest honors. But today, she's sharing one of the most defining experiences of her life. Her book, Hostage, a memoir of terrorism, trauma, and resilience, is the extraordinary story of surviving a plane hijacking and hostage crisis, and the decades-long journey from trauma and silence to healing, resilience, and hope. Mimi, I think one of the strong messages in your book is resilience. You really learned how to be resilient. You went through so many different things, and this gives people hope because there are a lot of people who've gone through trauma, not at the level you have. I mean, certainly everything you had was compartmentalized in a short period of time, and you had no idea. I mean, I can't even imagine what you went through. But the way you were able to evolve and find your inner strength, that's a really powerful message for readers.
Thank you. Well, true stories can inspire you, and they can get you to think about who you are and what you've been through. And I think the truth is we don't know what courage and resilience we have until we're in that position.
Yeah.
Until we're put to the test. And you don't have to be a hostage on a plane like I was to feel that. I mean, you can be a caretaker for somebody and just overwhelming, work that you didn't think you could face, right? It's a moment of, it's loss, it's work, it's love, but it's a different life. And as I began to write, I realized that there's many ways of being a hostage, actually. So the title and all is, I think it's really reflective of beyond the kind of hostage situation I had. People can be hostage to many situations. They can be hostage to personal relationships that are or even toxic work environments, or, anything that they just can't get out of, familial problems. And I feel like we're all, so many of us have been struggling for so long with this, and then not having the capacity to talk about it. So, I felt like this story is important to think about. And it's really taken me a lifetime to realize that we need to talk about our trauma and share it, because these stories are things that we can learn from. And so that's why I wrote this, after so many years, because I thought there were messages.
Oh, some powerful messages. Yeah. Most people would just be sitting thinking, what would I do in the same situation? I don't think a lot of people can comprehend it. And you were at a crossroads, really. Your identity, would you say your identity was maybe forged under pressure? Would you say that you formed a whole new identity after that experience?
Oh, absolutely. One of the, I think, hallmarks of being a hostage is your identity is taken from you. Like my identity was as a college student and sort of, a hippie and things. I couldn't, that identity had no meaning in this other context of being, hostage in Jordan. And so, and I had no power over what I wanted to do. And I was just forced to live in this moment with this little bit of hope that I wouldn't be killed. But when I came home, I don't know that I think my new identity was forged by my, moving out of my fear zone and starting to travel, which forced me to be in the present moment rather than carry this, my identity when I came home was really powerfully sketched, I think, by this hostage experience. And it replaced the other me. Now I was still carrying this hostage experience, the weight of trauma with me, inside me. And as I move forward, to move out of it a bit when I traveled through Africa, and this was just as a traveler, and Asia, walking and hitchhiking and just being with new people, I just had to, I was no longer hostage. I was more spontaneous and more present. And again, observing, talking to people, and not being there, not telling them the story, because I had already put it away, for better or worse, but just moving forward and letting go a little bit, little by little. And so that enabled me, I think, to move into a newer life. And I think, sort of balance this kind of move. Literally, I think I put this away for so long.
Well,
And, I needed to examine it, though. I really did.
You didn't want the experience to define you. And
Yes.
certainly if you were bringing it up, people would be focusing on that, not you. And I'm sure that it was so frustrating when you said when you came back, a lot of the people your age were saying, wow, that's really cool, man. That's not a good way to describe that kind of situation. And they weren't getting it at all. And the fairy tale perspective that they had, that had to make you really feel like an outlier or somebody who just didn't fit in anymore.
Yeah, it did. That's so true. I just didn't fit, and I didn't know where I fit. I didn't fit in with my parents' narrative, which was just move on. I didn't fit with my college friends, and I just didn't know where I fit. And I also didn't know that I was suffering from PTSD. But there was nobody to talk to. As a student, and I think as a culture, we were unaware that could happen to people. And what it can do to you, the kind of paralyzing fear that you might have. And, that was not healthy. And so even over the years, I think even when I did go to therapy for some other reason, I would not even mention that I had been a hijack hostage. It really wasn't until I started writing this book that I finally went to therapy to talk about this and my trauma was so buried that I had to be told that I was sort of trauma survivor, because I just put that identity, I just hid it. It's really hard to imagine now, but this is true.
And then that's what trauma survivors do. They stuff the feelings. They're in denial.
Yes, I was in total denial that I had experienced a trauma because, hey, I had moved on. And it wasn't, I think what happened to me is in the writing of the book, it was such a journey within, that there was so much catharsis that I cried so much. I mean, I still cry if I read. And I think before I started, it's interesting because this is the first time, even having written the book now and having processed it, quite a different thing to talk about it. Here I am talking to you about it, but it's still a one-on-one, but to talk about it in front of a group is something different again. It's really bringing it into the light. And it's fascinating to me to see how much there is to say about it and how I feel differently. I mean, I think when you've held something inside and you start to pull back the curtain and look at it, its power over you diminishes. You don't realize how much power it has over you, how much it's controlling your reactions to life, even if you seem resilient, which is a big word. I mean, you're never always resilient, right? I mean, you have moments of resilience. It's a complex construct. So even though I am resilient, that doesn't mean I still didn't carry this buried trauma with me, right? So it's a very complicated, I think, but the thing I think that I really learned is that, this has less power over me now. And it's kind of like grief in the sense that I release the fear, but it's a healing journey.
Yep.
And grief is a process, and healing is a process. And I don't think you get to a point where you're healed. I just don't think life is like that. And it's the same way that grief continues.
Sure.
You're triggered by something. You feel it.
You set yourself free by writing this book, and you're actually setting a lot of other people free who can identify, maybe not in your experience, but they've had their own.
Yes.
This is really powerful. Hostage, a memoir of terrorism, trauma, and resilience. Where do people find your book?
They can find it on Amazon. And if you buy it and you read it and you like it, please review it on Amazon, even if it's just a few words. It's very important to get the word out. On Amazon, they can find it on Bookshop. They can find it on the press. It's University of Nebraska Press. You can get it there. I mean, it's available. It's available in bookstores now, I hope. You can get it at Barnes & Noble or other independent bookstores. And I think I would love for people who have listened to me talk about this to read the book, because I think the book carries a different level of intensity. And I think it really puts the reader, my goal was to put the reader on the plane with me and in Amman during the bombings and really make it very visceral.
It certainly is. I think anybody reading it is not going to want to put it down.
Thank you.
I mean, it's seriously something that there's so many things people have as takeaways. Not only your experience, but understanding of a new perspective, what was going on at the time. It's still relevant today. And then what you went through in terms of trauma, people can take a step back and say, I can identify in a different way, but I can identify. And you're a survivor, you're a storyteller, and you're bringing something to life that needed to be talked about. And it's a really valuable lesson for people.
Thank you. I really appreciate that so much. And, if I step aside from this being my book, I think that is so true. I mean, I've just come to realize that there are just so many people who, like me, were socialized into not talking about their trauma. And it's really helped me to begin that path of just addressing it, looking at it, just feeling it.
Bringing it out into the light.
Yes.
Take the trauma, treat it like a vampire, put it out in the light, and it will dissolve itself, right?
Yes, I love that. Yes, that's exactly right. I mean, I don't think it totally dissolves, but it becomes a lot smaller. And maybe it is dissolving. Maybe it has dissolved. I don't know. I'll have to think more about that.
That's just something that came to my mind at that moment. But
Yes, I like it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for being on our show. This is really powerful.
Thank you. I so appreciate your questions and your interest in my work.
How can you not be interested? It's fascinating.
I just want to say one thing, which is that this hijacking that occurred to me in the hostage experience, this really changed the world. And I'll tell you how. Travel after this was never the same, because before this, you remember a time when you could walk to the gate with people
Yeah.
a long time ago? Well, after this, they made the metal detectors. They put the metal detectors in all the airports so people couldn't get on the planes with guns anymore. And so it really did change our travel. And it's only gotten stricter. And it's all to control what happened because of what happened here.
You went through a terrifying experience it changed the world. It changed global aviation security. The world was never the same when you think about it. I think we were all kind of innocent at that time.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And look, the other thing, of course, is that this same problem is right here with us right now today.
Yes, it is.
It hasn't resolved.
No,
It hasn't resolved, and it's only gotten worse.
it's scary.
So scary, the world we live in today, yes.
Mm.
And it's only expanding, but this was the seeds of it.
It really was.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mimi. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for narrating.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
If you're getting value from our show, Women Road Warriors, be sure to hit follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss out on what's coming next. We hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. And if you want to hear more episodes of Women Road Warriors or learn more about our show, be sure to check out womenroadwarriors.com. And please follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. On our website, we also have a selection of podcasts just for women. There are a series of podcasts from different podcasters. So if you're in the mood for women's podcasts, just click the Power Network tab on womenroadwarriors.com. You'll have a variety of shows to listen to anytime you want to. Podcasts made for women. Women Road Warriors is on all the major podcast channels like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, YouTube, and others. Check us out. And please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a topic or feedback, email us at sjohnson@womenroadwarriors.com.